never heard that, but that's the origin of CAP. I'm going to look this up. I'm going to look.
There's a principle that
Right.
we have to follow.
Yeah.
We have to have.
Be true to yourself. You don't have.
And when I came back, the place was a mess. So I knew I was missed.
Deep in here now. Now
It's incredible. I love it.
Me
That's
too.
good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And applying the recovery, I thought. Hello there again. I'm here with our esteemed guest, Chris Gatewood, CSAC, LPC, SMART Recovery Regional Coordinator. It's more complicated than that, but that's what we're going with for the purposes of broadcast. And we're just going to go over some stuff and see what's happening. So, welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to get you back on here. Chris was on here, it was like 3 years ago.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, it sneaks up. I mean, it really does. I think that was 2023, but
Still getting used to 2026.
I know, me too. But that's cool. I like to see people, it gives me hope and a good feeling to see people persevere in this field, whether it's for their personal life or professionally, whichever way. And I've seen that with you. I've known Chris for quite a while. So we do a lot of 12-step here. We also have SMART Recovery, which Chris is the facilitator for. So we were going to talk a little bit about how that's different than 12-step meetings and kind of what the focus is with that and how long you've been doing it.
Yeah. So I've been connected with SMART Recovery for about a decade now. That I started working at a clinic down in Chesterfield where they had a SMART Recovery meeting currently going there, and had just never been to one. So kind of figured it was one of those, let's see if there's more tools I can put in my tool belt. Let's attend this. And it kind of scratched an itch that I hadn't really been getting at other meetings that I had been attending. And I kind of liked the idea of just getting different perspectives and pulling things in, because to me, recovery is kind of this like living, breathing thing. Like if I only ever do one thing, I'm not necessarily understanding the full gamut of ways that people interpret, or maybe there's a tool that's more specifically designed for a specific task. The old thing of if only tool you have is a hammer, everything might as well be a nail.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah. So having options. And I ended up, the person who had been running that just wasn't trying to work nights or do anything like that anymore. So she asked me if I wanted to take over the meeting, took the training, took over it, and have been running them pretty consistently every week since. So
it's quite awesome. You find it relatively popular? I've seen that when I've been here, but
it kind of ebbs and flows. When I was running it down in Chesterfield, not as big. We had about 4 or 5 people that were coming out each week.
Yeah.
There was a little time where I was moving from place to place before I wound up running one out of here, where we had a decent crowd that was showing up. And here, I kind of attribute a lot to it of this location is within walking distance to like 10 sober houses, so we get a decent amount of foot traffic.
The recovery district up here,
yeah. So it averages out about like 20 people each week now, which when I tell other people, they're like, that's insane. I've never had more than 3.
Yeah, that's quite awesome, actually. The longevity there, a lot of our people, I hear from them that they really like having that alternative, and some of them just latch onto that, whereas they don't get attached to the 12-step or whatever else they're provided with. So that's really cool. How did you become a facilitator?
Well, I basically at the time just kind of asked, how do you do it? And they had an online like facilitator training that was set up to be done over the course of like 6 weeks or something like that, where you just kind of sit down at a computer, go through a bunch of stuff, and at the end of it, you take a short quiz and you're good. And I remember taking that, and after I got qualified as a facilitator, it was a pretty smooth process. That's actually one of the big things that SMART Recovery did a big revamp last year, where they launched a whole new training for facilitators, where as opposed to being that kind of like self-directed, hey, you just need to go through all of these in the next 6 weeks, they actually kind of have it on a schedule thing where they do a lot more of like live example stuff. So you'd be in part of a cohort, and when going through it, they'd do like, okay, you're at a meeting and someone has appeared under the influence, and do a role play just right there, which that kind of like experiential side of things, I think, does help to train better facilitators, even if there is kind of like that sterile version of like, this isn't quite real. And nobody acts drunk as well as they think they act drunk, but
it's fun to try, I think.
Yeah. It's still like an interesting, like different way of approaching things that does a lot more hands-on, kind of provides immediate feedback, as opposed to like when I took over as the regional coordinator about 5 years ago for the state. One of the main things that I ended up doing is I'd get announcements and emails sent to me whenever somebody graduated the facilitator training. So I'd reach out and try to introduce myself and just say, hey, name's Chris Gatewood. Here's what I do. And if you ever need any help, just reach out to me. And the number one thing that I'd get like reached out for was, I just took the training. I haven't run a meeting before. How do I do that?
Wow.
I'm like, okay. So I usually try to get with people, usually like through some type of a digital format like Zoom or what have you, because like, yeah, it's kind of a hard swing to go out to like Leesburg on a like middle of the week. But to kind of like go through like, here's some of the stuff if you get a chance. Usually like the best advice I would give somebody that's like interested in getting the meeting going, if they've already taken the training, would be just attend a couple of meetings just so we get that kind of like live example in our head.
Right.
Because you can imagine 12-step, somebody's read the basic text cover to cover. You wouldn't expect them to open a meeting by themselves if they never actually attended an NA meeting. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, good analogy.
Like that's one of those, you get a reference point that you can build off of. And that type of experiential thing that I've got an example to work off of tends to be very easy for, at least I have like sort of a script I can lean on in the early days when I'm getting my feet under me.
Right. Can you tell them what SMART stands for?
Stands for self-management and recovery training. And every English major that just heard that is like wincing at capitalizing the A in SMART, but
they can just deal with it. It works. It works. And it looks better with that A capitalized, I think. So it's like a more educational aspect to it from what I've seen.
That tends to be a bit more of my style than anything else. Most of SMART is built around cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, where a lot of it is kind of worksheet based, as opposed to having like a basic text. They have a workbook that people kind of work their way through. And a lot of times the way that meetings are initially structured is like people would either A, do a check-in, or B, I've seen a lot of people starting to like move away from doing check-ins and just saying like, hey, we're going to go through each of these things in order, kind of like a literature study meeting or something, where they just kind of rotate through. And whatever the worksheet is, just kind of like the facilitator will lay out, here's how the like worksheet's supposed to be done. Everybody take a chance and fill it out, and then we'll go from there. I kind of didn't do that from the jump because I rarely had access to a copier. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not printing off a ton of like worksheets for people, and I'm certainly not expecting people to bring workbooks every week.
Yeah, exactly.
So I kind of shifted gears into being more of a like psychoeducational, like let's present ideas, talk about stuff. And even with my more kind of lecture format, I try to do a lot of back and forth, like interaction stuff. So I might be doing the worksheet as like, I'm just up at a whiteboard writing stuff out and like asking, all right, so fill in what are the reasons why people used, and then people scream them out and just start going through them. Right. So kind of doing it as a live demonstration type thing, which I think works better for me anyways. But
yeah, it seems like a good approach. I mean, like I said, I've talked to a lot of people that has made the difference for them, having that pathway. And that's one thing we try to support here is all the different pathways, because you never know what's going to save somebody's life or improve it. And you were telling me about some facts about Narcan. We haven't talked about that in quite a while up here.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day because it kind of came up while I was kind of thinking about some other stuff and talking about it actually came up while I was talking about anxiety at one of the like SMART meetings a couple of weeks back, because like really rewinding here to origin points and such with Narcan. Narcan being a brand name, it's actual chemical is naloxone. The long-acting version is Naltrexone. Pop quiz. When was that developed? How old is it?
That's a good question. I want to say like 10 years, but it's probably longer than that.
Can't remember the actual date, but it's like late 60s, early 70s.
Oh, wow. So it's been around.
Long time.
And they didn't use it, or they didn't know about it? Or...
So what it was used for is it was originally developed as a PTSD medication. Yeah. So in our brain, we've got a meter that measures our current level of stress. And if that stress meter gets too high and crosses a specific threshold, we go into something called hyperarousal. This is, you might have heard of fight or flight.
Yes.
There's two others. Do you know the other two?
I do not.
Freeze and fawn. Fight, flight, freeze are pretty self-explanatory. Fawn is usually a little bit harder, so I switched that one out. Follow directions.
Okay.
So if the reason I'm stressed is someone's yelling at me to do something, one of the legitimate responses is you do the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Now, when that happens, what's going on in our brain is we hit that level of threshold, our cortisol levels get too high, our brain will release endorphins. And endorphins are naturally occurring opioids in our brain. We just have those.
Right.
It's kind of the idea of the first time somebody ever does an opioid, your brain doesn't go, what is this? And then grows opioid receptors. They already exist for a reason.
They're there.
So when those get released, it shuts down the nucleus accumbens and kind of shuts down our prefrontal cortex, which is where our decision making, our executive functioning, all that stuff happens. And we basically go into autopilot. Mm-hmm. That's why the fight, flight, or freeze or follow directions is just impulsive. It just happens. We're not in the driver's seat anymore. Now, that threshold in our brain for our stress levels, that varies from person to person, and it adjusts based on environment, our history, our experiences, and it can lower itself over time based on circumstances. So you can imagine something like there needs to be a certain level of stress for me to go into that versus somebody who's in an active combat role or war zone. The threshold for them to go into react mode probably should be lower than it is for me just sitting at home watching TV.
That makes sense.
Because if you're in war zone, you hear a pop or a whiz, now is not the time to debate. Now is the time to get down.
Right.
That's supposed to be immediate. So being in those high stress environments starts to train our brain to lower the threshold before we go into that. And that's actually one of the side effects or one of the kind of concepts behind PTSD is it's just naturally lowered because it took a while for it to go down. It's going to take a while to come back up. And that's why when you think about classic ideas of veterans with PTSD, you hear a car backfire and hit the deck. Yeah. It's because their brain still associates that loud pop sound with this is danger, get down. When that lowers, that becomes problematic. Now, remember I said endorphins are naturally occurring opioids in our system. What does naloxone and naltrexone do?
It reduces the effect. It blocks it, right?
It turns off the receptor sites.
Okay.
So your brain will still go into that response mode where it releases the endorphins and floods the system to try and kick you out of the driver's seat, tell you to go away for 5 minutes. But it's not going to do anything because even when they attach the receptor sites, those receptor sites aren't functioning right now.
Right.
So that's where it actually originated back in the day as a PTSD medication. There's a bunch of people that were coming back from war zones and stuff. You put somebody on that, their body might go through a lot of the same physiological adjustments and such, but they're not going to go into that autopilot mode. And it makes it a lot easier for people to talk about trauma and things like that without shutting down. Now, there's a lot of other reasons why somebody might have that lowered threshold. Addiction can actually do a lot of that because if we're talking about high stress, high stakes environments, anybody that's ever been in those last few weeks of active addiction where I'm not even thinking about tomorrow, I'm thinking about how am I going to get through the next 30 minutes, constant stress, it really lowers that down. There's also there's a big study that happened a number of years ago that got new life and has been getting studied a lot more recently called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, which is a questionnaire of about 20 different questions that all relate to like home environment growing up.
Right.
So there'd be stuff like, was there domestic abuse in the household, drug use in the household, all of those types of things that kind of like get to this idea is where you lived, was that unsafe? The higher that people score on that, where it's like every yes is a point, and it's like after you hit 7 or 8 points, you're already at like elevated risk for litany of things,
Right.
tons of stuff, including addiction. And the kind of like understood biological reason for that is because all those things lower that response threshold. And thus the idea of somebody turning to a coping mechanism to like just not have to deal with that amount of like stress constantly.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense that they found some way of trying to cope that might not have been particularly healthy.
Yeah, I hear that. Like we're just trying to feel normal as we define it, or feel relaxed, calm, receptive.
And one of the kind of other wild things that I think about here is I still remember this. This was actually I had to write a research paper or a research proposal for one of my classes in grad school where in early recovery, you also have that like escalated stress response. Like people are already operating at 50%. You've met people in that first week of like
Yes.
detox and everything.
Or 10% or 3.
Like the amount of stretch between like good and stressed out is a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that I was thinking about was like, if this actually avoids that hyperarousal response, and one of the responses could be follow directions, our brain following directions might also just go to the last thing that worked. So I know what helps me de-stress. I get into that place, I'm probably going to go do that. And I don't want that to happen because I'm trying to do the recovery thing.
Right.
So it would make sense to me that wouldn't people that are put on naloxone or naltrexone being the longer acting one, would they benefit from just being on it because it eliminates a lot of that hyperarousal system? And I was actually doing an internship at the time at the Carey Center for VCU, the Collaborative Advanced Research Imaging. Like they did MRI studies and stuff. And I knew one of the big things they would do were these like, okay, you show somebody with a, say, marijuana use disorder, cannabis use disorder, a bunch of images of like squirrel, robin, bird house, what have you. And then you just show them like a bowl.
Right.
And what part of their like
what gets fired up there.
Yeah, and like it is instantaneous, like how quickly our brain reacts to those things. And I'm like, okay, how's this for a research idea? Let's take 2 groups of people, put some in the control trial that aren't actually getting any of this, some of them on the naltrexone, and then just expose both of them to the same battery of things and see if that's actually stimulating the hyperarousal like response.
Right.
And I put together the entire research proposal. I was actually rather proud of this because everybody else in class put together ones where their like budget for it was $20.
Right.
I broke $1 million.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Let's go for it.
MRI studies are not cheap. But after I like put that in, the next day I was checking the VC libraries for research studies. Somebody else had did it. And the results they found were the ones I was expecting. That people who are on naltrexone do not have that like hyperarousal response in the like presence of triggering images and things related to whatever their use was, which actually explains why naltrexone is generally prescribed across the board for like all of the addictions. Like you can hear the idea of like, okay, if somebody is say using opioids, something that blocks opioids makes sense.
Right.
Alcohol being a partial receptor on opioid receptors then makes sense. Pop quiz, do you know what else attaches to opioid receptors?
No, I don't.
Sugar.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Totally. Not thinking of a drug per se, but like.
It's the most commonly used psychoactive substance in the world.
It certainly works.
That's why naltrexone is also used as a diet aid.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to work at a methadone clinic, which is a replacement therapy where if somebody's withdrawing, then you put somebody on a different opioid, keeps them from going into withdrawals, and it's easier for them to like pay attention and work on stuff. And I had a guy once who he had his physical, and doctor told him that he like needed to lose some weight.
Right.
And most diet pills are actually amphetamines that are just there to speed up your metabolism, burn off a bunch of stuff. Can't be on that while on methadone because one speeds up, one slows down your heart. Those don't balance in the middle. They roller coaster and people get really bad heart problems. So after the first doctor he went to tried to give him a prescription for amphetamines, we told him, like, no, you can't do that. Second doctor gets another prescription for amphetamines, told him you can't do that. He doesn't tell us about the third one. Got prescribed something called Contrave, which is a combination of Wellbutrin and Naltrexone.
Okay.
He didn't tell us about this. He took his first dose of Contrave. What happened?
That's a good question. Did it send him into withdrawal?
It kicked the methadone out of his system, and he called me having a very bad day.
Yeah, that's a murderous feeling right there.
Yeah. That became my new one of the, whenever getting somebody oriented onto a program or something like that, like, this is the reason why you tell all of your doctors about each other.
Yes.
Because you can tell people about comorbidities all day, like, mixing these things have potential lethal consequences. And they're like, yeah, sure. This will put you into full-blown withdrawals. Okay, now I'm taking this seriously.
Yeah, now I'm listening.
Yeah. So, like, that stuff makes sense for, like, why somebody might be on naltrexone, but you wouldn't necessarily think about it from a, like, standpoint of, say, cannabis use or amphetamines or cocaine or what have you, or even one of the places I worked at made its name in gambling disorder.
Okay.
We also offered that as one of those, like, wraparound services of, hey, if you want to get on naltrexone, they're like, why would that help? It's because you see a lot of the same stuff where it's it's helping avoid this hyperarousal response early on.
That's pretty awesome. It's like a one size fits all reducer of cravings and in general. So that probably helps a lot of people. It's not very widespread though, those uses.
There are definitely, like, issues and stuff that kind of arise out of it because, yeah, it blocks a lot of stuff. And even, like, especially that sugar thing, the fact that sugar doesn't actually respond to people anymore, and then realizing how much sugar is actually in our diet on any given day, like, not feeling any of those effects tends to make people kind of miserable for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other stuff that just kind of comes from it. But I've heard people complain about dreams and all that, and I don't argue with anybody for their experiences. I don't know all the ins and outs about what side effects people have had from that, but it's one of those, I think it is something that's worthwhile to talk and explore with, say, a physician or doing something. If I'm coming off of stuff and there's, like, options to make this not the worst thing in the world, then yeah,
it's hard to say no. What from that clinical side that you have, do you think has the most benefit for people in early recovery?
So one of the things that I had seen experiential wise, but also from the research has been exceptionally helpful. There's a couple of key indicators of, like, at 30 days, if this is happening, this is usually, like, that's the golden ticket. The likelihood they're still going to be around at 90 days is good. And if they're still there at 90 days, they're probably golden up to a year.
Yeah.
And the big ones for that one is stable environment.
Mm-hmm.
Finding a place that they can go to that is supportive of whatever their recovery is and is not subject to, like, intermittent change, what have you. So the idea of, like, sober living is one of the big aspects. That can be, like, I know plenty of people who have had rough experiences at sober living houses and stuff because stuff still happens. But the idea of having someplace stable and calm that, like, where's my home base I can retreat back to and have, like, that personal recharge space, people that get that locked down, it's a whole lot easier. And I can also remember I had a woman on my caseload years ago who I inherited from another therapist when they had left the agency we were at, who had been doing fine. She was completely stable for the past, like, 2 years. This was one of those, like, here, I'm going to give you somebody on your caseload.
Yeah.
Going to be a breeze. You talk to them once a month and they're doing all right. I'm like, cool. And she was doing fine for about 3 months until her boyfriend got out of jail.
Okay.
Boyfriend was a dealer. That became a trap house overnight.
Wow.
The last time that she had actually called me, she had locked herself into the, like, bedroom and had barricaded the cracks in the door with towels and duct tape to keep the cockroaches out.
Oh boy.
It is unrealistic for me to assume that she is going to stay clean and sober in that environment.
Yeah, that's just too much.
Yeah.
That's why we try to recommend people staying, if they commit to sober living at all, to stay at least 6 months to a year, give themselves a chance to establish a sober foundation mentally.
And there is like good news. I ran into her years later, and like boyfriend got rearrested and she was doing fine afterwards. And that's one of those, like, it's nice when you get the chance to actually hear follow-ups on these things when somebody disappears. Otherwise you're just kind of scared. But like hearing that there was more of a happy ending to that story is nice. The other stuff, this one, we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, but employment. Oddly enough, like vocational rehabilitation has like a 95% success rate, where if you get somebody a good placement and not just the like, okay, they're getting a stream of income and structure, but you get somebody that feels like they're actually doing something that matters to them, and they're able to actually kind of enjoy and feel like they're accomplishing stuff each day. Like that amount of reward that comes from doing something that you care about is something that helps people stick around and stay. That's why I was at a conference maybe 2 years ago, and one of the people that was attending the conference was with DARS, the Department of Aging and Rehab Services, and he was part of like the reentry program from jails, where they'd go to see him for vocational assessments, and he'd get them set up with like jobs on the way back out. And when he talked about of the like 50 people that have gone through our program in the past 2 years, we have a 95% success rate.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
And it's one of those, like, I'm not going to just get some dude a job at U-Crops, like stocking shelves, because for some people that, like, they appreciate the idea of doing something like manual labor with their hands. But even then, it doesn't feel like you're really accomplishing much when you're just restocking a shelf. But if it's the idea of, like, you get somebody who really wants to build something and you get them a job in construction that they're able to actually, like, point to something afterwards and go, like, I did that. And that sense of, like, pride and accomplishment, that's the golden stuff that keeps things going long term. So those tend to actually be like the big things. Outside of that, the other two that are kind of there, and this was from a research study I saw that was on, like, it was a thing called natural recovery or spontaneous remission, which was people who just out of the blue decide, like, I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Yeah, I've met some of those people. I don't understand them. I wish I did, but
what it found was like the top three indicators for them was, one, environmental change, getting out of whatever circumstance or situation they were in. Two was remembering past consequences. So like reminding ourselves, okay, this did not go well last time. And the third one is like gratitude. It's finding and appreciating the stuff that is going well, recognizing success. The other key statistic I kind of want to pull out from that research study too, though, was like, it's not impossible for people to just do it on their own and just decide, yeah, I'm good. I can see someone trying to quit like alcohol 32 times. I don't think somebody doing fentanyl's got 32 in them.
No, they certainly may not. They may not have one, these days.
So I kind of like, when I talk about some of these things, I say like insight is something that goes across everything. But beyond that,
yeah, that's good stuff right there. Do you want to tell everybody where and when your SMART recovery meeting is? I'm not going to tell them how close it is to us right now because we're about 15 feet away. But.
So I run mine out of Hatcher Memorial Baptist Church, which is somewhat mixed messaging, considering SMART is seen as kind of like the like secular aspect. But hey, y'all haven't charged me rent in 6 years, so
yeah, it's a nice place to have a meeting.
We are in the chapel, again, mixed messaging, but hey, it accommodates the bigger space because we've been getting more and more people recently. We meet Friday nights at 6 o'clock, 6 to 7.
Excellent. I've been there. I encourage you guys to check it out. Like, you never know what's going to make that big difference for you. So give it a shot. And thank you, Chris, for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you on again.